Good afternoon, fellow Armenians. Today I find myself in front of the Consulate General's office in Glendale. I'm here to speak to you about the All Armenia Fund Telethon that's coming up on November 22nd, 2018. The Armenia Fund, as you know, or might not know, has been riddled with corruption since its inception over 20 years ago. The Armenia Fund generally, the way it's structured is, it's controlled by the Armenian government. And the past government of Serge Sarkisyan, before that Robert Kocharyan, before that Levon Petrosyan, have used the Armenia Fund in different ways to enrich themselves and their associates and people that are connected with them. Today we are calling once again to boycott the All Armenia Fund this year, because although the Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, and even the President of Armenia, who was appointed by the former government, Armen Sarkisyan, have called to the Armenian diaspora to donate to the All Armenia Fund. The reason why we're continuing our boycott, which we started 7 years ago, is because currently the Armenia Fund's office in Los Angeles, which is run by the executive director, Sarkis Kotanjan, and his staff, were appointed by the former corrupt government. And as we know, in July of this year, Arav Artanyan, the executive director of the Hayastan All Armenia Fund, which is based in Armenia, was arrested for embezzlement. And once he was arrested, the Armenia Fund corporate board here, which consists of members from the different benevolent organizations, the revolutionary organizations, the churches, called an emergency meeting. And before that meeting, hours before that meeting was to convey, the office of the Armenia Fund, led by Sarkis Kotanjan, who is the executive director here in Los Angeles and currently is, issued a communique that the Armenia Fund arrest of Arav Artanyan had nothing to do or had no effects on the monies of the All Armenia Fund. This unauthorized communique by Kotanjan was noted by one of the corporate board members, namely the Khunchagyan organization, the Armenian Democratic Khunchagyan Party, who immediately suspended their membership of the board, and they noted why, that of what had happened, and they also noted that in the past decade, the corporate board has had no voice because it was, in fact, the board was being controlled by the LA staff, which was appointed not by the corporate board, as it should be, based on the bylaws of the All Armenia Fund, but rather was appointed by Arav Artanyan, the executive director of the Armenia Fund, who was under the control and influence of the Armenian government, namely Serge Sarkisyan, and the corrupt regime that was recently removed from power in Armenia. So for this reason, and because Sarkis Kotanjan still remains in power, we are calling for a continued boycott of the Armenia Fund again this year, to send a message to the Armenia Fund and to the Armenian government that until the Armenia Fund and those that have stolen over the last 2 decades monies and misappropriated monies and abused their power within the Armenia Fund are not punished, the Armenia Fund can no longer ask the Armenian diaspora, or any Armenian for that matter, for donations to support this cause, which is riddled still in corruption. I want to also note something, that what the Armenia Fund has collected over the last 20 plus years has been approximately $300 million in donations. Yet, during the last 10 years, $500 million in Armenia has not been collected in taxes each year from the oligarchs and large businessmen. And these are associates and people that are connected primarily with the former regime, the corrupt regime that was recently removed in April. And on top of this, another $250 million has been leaking from the budget every year, which just 1 year of budgetary leaks, if that leak is stopped, is enough to basically do all the work that the All Armenia Fund has done since its inception. So our call to the Armenian government also is, and the Armenia Fund, is to have major reforms, and the projects which the Armenia Fund has been doing over the last 20 years have been primarily the obligation of the Armenian government, meaning paid for by taxes. Thus, the Armenia Fund needs to reform, and if they are going to be a fund that benefits Armenians, then they should be rebranded as the Armenian Fund and to directly aid Armenians in need worldwide. Other than this, there is no reason to give to the Armenia Fund at this point, as currently the Prime Minister and the President of Armenia have encouraged diasporan Armenians to open up their pockets and give to the Armenian Fund. Forget about the past. The dark pages of the past should be forgotten, and we should just move forward. Well, unfortunately, it can't work that way when currently Sarkis Kotanjan and his LA staff are still in power. And by the way, I want to make a few notes here about Sarkis Kotanjan. The Armenia Fund generally, here locally in LA, takes in $2 to $3 million a year, even though they report on the Telethon that they take in $20 or $30 million. This is false information. Most of that money that the Armenia Fund is reporting are projects that are already in progress in Armenia by other organizations, and they just reported on the Telethon, using this as a way to build trust amongst the people, to think that millions of dollars are being collected by the Armenia Fund. But this is not true. You can look at their 990 tax returns, which are on this page down below, and you can see that there have actually been years where East Coast and West Coast Armenia Fund have taken in about $3 million. Their expenses have been about $2 million locally, and the money that they actually sent to Armenia is just a percentage of that $3 million. Also, it should be noted that Sarkis Kotanjan, the executive director of the Armenia Fund here, although in 2011 he told me he makes $3,000 a month as executive director, that was a lie. Today he's making $130,000 a year as his base salary. This doesn't include all the costs that come along with an executive director that has to travel, that has to have transportation, office expenses, all that other things to keep them. And today Sarkis Kotanjan owns a house that's valued at around $1 million in Glendale. All of that presumably comes from his salaries that he's collected over the years from the Armenia Fund. And this is the reality of what's going on. So I call out to all my fellow diasporans to once again boycott the Armenia Fund this year. Send a message to the Armenia Fund and the Armenian government that we will not tolerate corruption within any organization, especially one that is so near and dear to so many people's hearts. One other note. As the Prime Minister and the President are calling on Armenians to donate, it should be noted that the Armenians from Armenia who are citizens and live here under the Constitution that was not modified by the corrupt regime allowed them the right to vote living abroad. Just like Americans can vote while they're living abroad, you don't lose your voting rights. The same holds true for Armenians who are citizens of Armenia and are living abroad. This right was taken away from them illegally by the corrupt regime, the past corrupt regimes. And today, that right has not been restored, and I want to note that our new Prime Minister, Nikol Pashinyan, has known that we are going to be having elections shortly for Parliament or the National Assembly, and he did not take steps to restore this right of Armenians living abroad who have the right to vote for their representative in Parliament, regardless of where they live. Currently, where they reside. And many of the people here are here because they had to literally escape from Armenia because of the conditions created by the past regime. So I want to remind people that here is a situation where we are being asked to give money. They want our money, but they don't want our voice, basically. So this is the time to send this message. When the Armenia Fund asks you for donations, decline it this year again. By the way, we're trying to set up a meeting with the Consulate General here in Los Angeles. He's already been contacted, and we've been told that he is awaiting the new executive director of the All Armenia Fund, although I'm more interested in meeting with him because I'm more concerned about the government situation and their connections with the Armenia Fund and their endorsement to encourage people to donate in light of all the things that I've noted in this video, rather than the executive director of the Armenia Fund, since there's not a whole lot to talk to with him unless he wants to discuss the dismissing of Sakis Kotanjan, the corrupt executive director that was appointed by the former regime unjustly. So I invite you all to participate in our boycott this year. Once again, this is the 7th year that we're boycotting the Armenia Fund, and hopefully this will be the last. Let's get this all resolved. We're going to make it happen. Thank you very much for listening.